Hello, Outlaw Bookseller, Stephen Andrews here, and as you see we're outside today because it's a beautiful day. It's Saturday, it's my day off. And as you can see, I'm rereading my Gollancz Masterworks copy of The Discovery of Man, which is fantastic, and I'd forgotten how good these stories were. And this is a great edition. It has a timeline, or a chronology to use the correct term, in the back, and of course it's not complete though. And recently Matt Defoe of Science Fiction Reads, hi Matt, there's something coming for you in the post, put me on to the Nesfer one, which I'm surprised I never looked up before, because I do have some other Nesfer books. The Barry Marsberg Recursive SF book is really good, and I decided to order the Nesfer editions because, as I say, they're complete, but we'll come on to that. Recently just published, it might in fact not be out till next week, is this lovely little Macmillan Classics Library book, which is entitled Classic Science Fiction, and is edited by the very wonderful Adam Roberts. And just to show you what it's like, nice little jacket. It's got a nice light blue cloth under there, which is embossed and gilt on the spine. And you know, these are little sort of classic series. They do all the sort of obvious sort of things you'd imagine, and gilt edges. They've had several different sort of cover designs over the years. These are the nicest ones. And yeah, so they've finally done a little SF anthology, and just looking in it, Adam of course a very safe pair of hands, and he's provided an introduction which I haven't read yet, which I'm looking forward to reading. And there's some things in here which I used to have and I got rid of, and a couple of things I hadn't read, and there's some real classic stuff. So just to give you a rundown on what's in here, there's The Star by H.G. Wells, possibly his most famous single SF story, I'd say. Stanley Weinbaum's Martian Odyssey from the 1930s, which is a cracker for those of you who haven't read it. Fitzjames O'Brien's The Diamond Lens, which I don't know off the top of my head. Voltaire's Micromegas, which I have read. That takes me back. Mary Shelley's The Mortal Immortal. Edgar Allan Poe's Tales of the Ragged Mountains. Of course, I've read everything by Poe. I'd read everything by Poe by the time I was about 20, so you know. Florence McCandlesborough, The Automaton Heir. That's an unusual one, don't know that one. Edward Page Mitchell, The Tacky Pomp. Don't know that one off the top of my head either. Lovecraft's Colour Out of Space, yeah, of course. James Clerk Maxwell's To Herman Stockcraft, PhD, A Paradoxical Ode, after Shelley. So I imagine that's the Maxwell, the sort of electrical engineer, came up with the idea of Maxwell's Demon. Arthur Conan Doyle's Horror of the Heights, which is a cracker. Rokeya Sakhawat Hossein, Sultana's Dream. Don't know that one. Ambrose Bierce's Psychological Shipwreck. Bierce, of course, I've read. Accounts at Owl Creek Bridge is pretty much anthologized everywhere. And Wells's Door in the Wall. So there you go. So that's one to look out for, and it's $10.99. It is modestly sized but very beautiful, but nice little sort of gift for somebody, that just to show them that SF was around before the 1940s. So going back to Cordwainer, as I say, I decided to look into the Nesfer editions, and I mean, they've had multiple printings, these, and I think this is about the 11th or 13th, and this is the complete rediscovery of man. So for those of you familiar with this oeuvre, you know, there were lots of different little books over the years, little bits and pieces would pop up, The Space Lords, You Will Never Be the Same, all these things. But this is actually the complete instrumentality stories. So it contains everything that's in The Instrumentality of Mankind, The Rediscovery of Man in the Masterworks edition, which is this one here. And it also contains the three novellas which were collected and published by Gollancz as Quest of the Three Worlds. The last time there was a major Smith publishing program in the UK was the late 80s, and Gollancz did them all in hardcover and in paperback, and we got behind them. I'm looking forward to this because it presents all of the stories, including the non-instrumentality ones. There are a few of them in chronological order, so I'm really looking forward to that. And beautiful book, not cheap, but very, very beautiful. Also, I decided that as it had been about 20 years since I last read it, apart from picking it up for a quick skim through before putting in 100 must-read science fiction novels, I decided to get the Nesfer in Australia, because what this doesn't only have the text of the book, it has the linking material, which was sort of published when Australia was first published in the US. It was published in 2 volumes, different titles, which I'll put up on the screen. and there was linking material, and that's included in here, and these are corrected texts, and they are absolutely gorgeous. So look at that, isn't that sexy? Fantastic. So, you know, that's another little bit for the outdoor bookseller's diary. So I'm just going to put my glasses back on because it's a bit sunny here and do some more reading. I'll see you in a moment. It's a bit oldish out here. It's a very hot house. The presence of the garden waste bin there kind of typifies science fiction, really. You can't ever entirely have nature untouched. In the technological world, there's always something of man imposing upon it. Now, no sooner than one sits down after doing a bit of filming and, you know, warbling on about Cordwainder Smith, that one finds another opportunity to present another obscure writer who deserves more attention, because in the post I've just had an R.A. Lafferty. Now, if you're familiar with R.A. Lafferty at all, you're probably quite old like me, or you might have bought this wonderful collection from Golax, which has got a dreadful cover. Is it terrible? The best of R.A. Lafferty, and it's got introduction by Neil Gaiman, you know, but don't let that put you off, because Neil does have good taste. I'm not a massive fan of his writing, but he's got good taste. He grew up reading all the right people, and there's lots of forwards to the stories in here by people like Harlan Ellison, Nancy Kress, Robert Silverberg, Jeff Vandermeer, Connie Willis and others, Samuel R. Delaney. And the trouble with something like that is you end up reading, you know, the forwards and afterwards more than you do the actual stories. I find that with Dangerous Visions, I always prefer reading Allison's sort of hyperbolic sort of interjections. But I've been rereading some of these recently and thinking I should read more Lafferty. And I've got Past Master, but I looked his books up and they're quite expensive. So, you know, and being the sort of guy who prefer to have a Dobson hardcover than a crappy old paperback, you know, it's you're looking like, man, hundreds of pounds in some cases. So it's time for an unboxing, because something I'd forgotten was that those lovely people at Golax, I don't always hate them, you know, they do have their merits, it has to be said, published a couple of years ago an omnibus edition of some of his novels, and I got this online for a mere £6.31, because I think it's going out of print. Let me just cast aside the cardboard and show it to you. R.A. Lafferty, 3 great novels. Not sure why they didn't do a masterwork of this. And it's got Space Chanty, which is widely regarded as a kind of space opera version of the Odyssey. And I think it's the chapter heading sort of rhyme into poetry. Fourth Mansions, which is another famous one, and Past Master, which I already got, which is about Sir Thomas More, which is utterly bonkers. So this is great. And oh, the tolling of the bell. Can you hear it? Esmeralda, she gave me water. So anyway, going on back to R.A. Lafferty, so there you are, that's great. So I'm looking forward to sort of reading the couple of books you haven't read. I've not read Space Chanty and I've not read Fourth Mansions, but he wrote a huge amount, about 30 novels altogether, so yet another obscurity to get into. Isn't that fantastic? I guess sometime during this video diary I'll talk to you about Lafferty and Cordwainder Smith, so you know why I'm so excited about them. But I've just come indoors and washed the old hair, which I'm going to get cut soon, so don't get too shocked. And I just remembered I got this the other day. Heinlein, Beyond This Horizon. NEL, this is an early 80s reprint, absolutely beautiful. And this of course is a, you know, a magazine fix up from the early 40s, not one I've read. I've always loved that jacket, isn't that great? You know, that's the sort of reissue you don't get these days. I'm quite excited about that, even though I'm not a massive Heinlein fan. Speaking about Heinlein, I recently read The Ofeki Hotline by John Varley, which is in all the reference books. Never got around to it. My instincts had always told me that Varley was not for me, and boy was I right. It looks like this. Now, we used to say in the book trade, never read a book with gold gilt on the cover, and it was pretty much proved right. It's brilliant ideas in it, but you know, it just didn't engage me at all. The writing didn't engage me, the characters didn't engage me. It's a shame really that the high concepts in it, a lot of which were quite influential, it came out in the late 70s, didn't really sort of match the sort of the style really. And on the cover it says, the edition I have, which is a Top Collins from the 90s, it says, Tom Clancy gives a quote, and he says, you know, John Varley's the best writer in America. Well, let me tell you something now. Tom Clancy might be able to sell best-selling techno thrillers, but he wasn't a great judge of prose. So, Cordwainder Smith. What is the excitement about? Well, I returned to him after seeing the guys at Bookpilled and Science Fiction Reads discovering it for the first time, and it reminded me of my first reading of him, and it sort of prompted me to return to him. So why is Smith so interesting and so important? Well, basically, he was a diplomat, political figure. His father had been a political figure before him. He was sort of born and raised in the Far East, where his father was involved with the Chinese government and what have you. And he wrote the sort of definitive textbook on psychological warfare. He was involved in advising the government on things like the Korean War. He wouldn't have anything to do with Vietnam. He died quite young, at the age of 53 in 1966. And he was a very interesting guy, and he did a few sort of mainstream novels, 2 under one name. He was soon outed, then he wrote a thriller under another surname, and he was outed again. And his first SF story, Scanners Live in Vain, which is an early instrumentality story, appeared in an obscure magazine. John W. Campbell had rejected it for astounding, and it had a huge impact on all sorts of people. I think it was Frederick Pohl pulled it out of this magazine and anthologized it in about 1954, so that brought it to greater attention, and it blew a lot of people away. And Smith's fiction in the Instrumentality series is episodic, piecemeal. You never see the whole picture, you just get flashes. You get the feeling that some of it is being told by an unreliable narrator, and it's very much in the realm of story. You can feel the Oriental influence, which is very poetic and delicate, sometimes sentimental. It also has some incredible harshness in it as well. There's flashes of the tech throughout. You know, you don't get pages and pages of descriptions of star drives and that sort of thing. You know, it's not hard SF in that sense, but it is kind of space opera, so it's really interesting. So it starts probably in about 1,000 years from now, and we see mankind's early attempts to travel through space. And of course, what everybody is realizing increasingly now, as there's talk of going to Mars all the time and what have you, is of course the effect that space travel has on the human body, you know. And this sort of prompted James Blish to write about pantropy and create that idea that people's bodies would have to be modified. And that's very much there in Blish's The Seedling Stars. It's very much there in Delaney's story I and Gomorrah, which I think is magnificent. On the Blish front, probably The Seedling Stars, just a few novellas. The best pantropy story in there is probably Surface Tension, is the one that people really love. So if you've not read those, do. Pantropy comes up now and again in SF still. It's done in a rather, you know, pointless way in Becky Chambers' To Be Taught If Fortunate, one of the worst science fiction novels I've ever read. And, you know, it's brilliantly handled in Frederick Pohl's 1976 novel Man Plus, which is my favourite novel by him. So there's some things to look at with pantropy. This refers back to Cordwainder Smith, in that you see in Scanners Live in Vain, his first published story, really sort of looked at a cadre of men who have been surgically altered for space travel and the effect it has on them. And it's very jarring and dissonant and hugely effective. It's, to a degree, there's certain feel of Van Vogt about it in a way. And you can see how influential it's been over other things. And it's the first story. It's not actually the first instrumentality story. When you get the Nessra edition of The Rediscovery of Man, the Gollancz one there is actually the same book as the one that Matt Defoe has been reading, which is entitled The Best of Cordwainder Smith. So that's the same book, different title. So the Nessra one is the complete one, is chronological. But as I say, this is great because it presents the chronology in a tabular form with the story titles and the basic events. Because as I said, it's episodic and piecemeal. It's hard to pick bits out of it. So you see that, and you see other early stories about attempts to sort of travel in space and in hyperspace. There's a wonderful one called The Game of Rat and Dragon, which is superb. And you see Smith's love of animals coming into this. He refers to cats particularly a lot. And there are wonderful sort of moments with cat astronauts in The Game of Rat and Dragon. It's all fantastic stuff. And it's very sort of really lyrical. There's actually moments of poetry, and it's not very good poetry, but it's very lyrical. There's also moments of intense cruelty, and there's great stories in here like golden the ship was, O, which is great. And you gradually see, as mankind moves amongst the stars, their leaders, a cabal of individuals called the instrumentality of mankind, the lords of the instrumentality. This is the space lords from the short collection, the space lords it's called. They are long-lived figures. They're telepaths. Telepathy is quite common in Smith's universe, and they gradually sort of arrange things so that the humanity is leached out of human beings. There's less death because a drug is discovered that allows people to live for hundreds of years, and we'll come on to that. And you know, there's all sorts of tales of colonization, space travel, clashes with rogue settled planets and what have you. One of those, where a planet where everybody's male, is fantastic. And you know, there's a planet called Sheol where people are sent to be punished for misdemeanors. And then there's the underpeople. The underpeople are animals genetically engineered and modified to resemble people, but they still have a taint of the animal they're engineered from. So there are cat girls and dog people and what have you, and they're effectively slaves, and they're poor, and they don't have the same rights as the rest of humanity, and they're looked down on. And they often you know, do all sorts of special jobs. So there's sort of interesting stuff in this about the relationship between people and animals and class and what have you. The thing is with the stories is they're so rich and there's so much in them, and yet they're so incomplete, and that's the beauty of it. They're seductive and tantalizing, and that's what I like about them. So you get the bits and pieces, you know, it's absolutely marvelous. And then you get onto the novel Norstrilia, and Norstrilia focuses on one particular character and some of the supporting characters from the stories. And he is a young chap who lives on a planet called Old North Australia, settled by Australians, Norstrilia. And on Norstrilia, this sounds absurd, but it's great. The people there live fairly simple pastoral lives, and they raise giant mutant sheep, which are infected by a virus, which creates a drug called Stroon, Santa Clara. Creates the ability in the human body for it to live for hundreds of years, 400 years, virtual immortality. It's a long time. So, you know, it's a very important planet. So it's rather like Dune, but instead of, you know, melange, the spice seems to be able to do everything. You live forever, you've got this whatever. It's just like a get-out clause for everything, where Stroon is just simply about long-livedness, but it's really important. And it's an interesting story about how this young chap goes from being, you know, a shepherd on Australia to somebody who actually buys the planet Earth and helps the underpeople in their struggle against the instrumentality. And this sort of leads to what's called the rediscovery of man, which is where people rediscover death, they rediscover culture, and the instrumentality starts to loosen its grip. You know, I'm not really doing any spoilers here, because the whole point of Smith stories is not just the stories, it's the colour of them and the creative sweep and the poetry of them. So that's Cordwainder Smith, massively influential. You know, little read these days, it seems to me, and really not like anybody else. And you can see how he influenced all sorts of things. Like in this morning, rereading this one, the final story in there, A Planet Called Sheol, which is about where people are sent to be punished for various misdemeanors, reminded me of, you know, the sort of addictive metaphoric works of William S. Burroughs when he's looking at control and drug addiction and turning that into SF type narratives. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Burroughs had read Smith and vice versa. So, you know, he cast his net very wide, and he seems to have influenced everybody, and yet people don't seem aware of him. But that's because the output's relatively modest, and there hasn't been much in print in the UK, at least for quite some time. So that's Cordwainder Smith and why I got interested in him again. I seem to be very much the roving bookseller at the moment. I've just come back from a day's bookselling in Wells, which is about an hour and a half by car from where I live, and I've just got home and it's payday, yay! And I found this, it's just come from Amazon, which I'll show you now. American science fiction, 5 classic novels, 1956 to 1958, from the Library of America. There's 4 of these altogether so far. This is the only one I didn't have. I've been waiting for it to come down in price a bit. It's published in the USA, and these are really, really nice volumes. They've got these really nice sort of period jackets and full cloth. Oh, feels lovely. And a bit of gilt there, and a little bit of leather on the spine. Really nice. And what is in this one? Well, I'll tell you now. It's pretty much all stuff I've read, apart from the first book in here, which is Double Star by Robert Heinlein. Never read that one. I'm not a massive Heinlein fan, I think I've said before. Also, The Star's My Destination by Alfred Bester, which I still think of as Tiger, which was always the UK title for many years until, I suppose, the late 80s. Apparently, the text in here is correct, and the other ones, the Penguin one, apparently isn't correct, so I'm looking forward to that, and I can compare it to my Good Child hardcover and see if there's any difference. A Case of Conscience by James Blish, which I don't have in hardcover. Who by Algius Budrys, which I don't have in hardcover. I've never been that fussed on. I do like a bit of Budrys, but I've always felt that's fairly minor. And The Big Time by Fritz Leiber, which I've not read for years, and I wanted to reappraise, because I think a while ago, I think I said when I read a Nebula anthology, which I bought in Clifton, that I wasn't particularly impressed with Catch That Zeppelin. So I'm looking again at Leiber's SF. His fantasy and his horror, I'm sort of confident, but his SF, I think, needs reappraisal. So as I said, there's a whole set of these. If you want to hang on a sec, I'll show you the lot. Okay, so I've got a little really useful box here full of hardcover anthologies, and I'll show you the others in this series of American SF. This is the first one, 1953 to 1956, and that has Space Merchants by Paul and Kornbluth, aka Gravy Planet, More Than Human by Theodore Sturgeon, and a while ago, I think it was last year, I reread More Than Human for the first time in decades from this edition. I'm still, you know, Sturgeon, he's got a huge reputation, but I do think his writing was quite uneven. At his best, he was really good, but he was very uneven a lot of the time. Lee Brackett, Long Tomorrow, I love Lee Brackett. And The Shrinking Man by Richard Matheson, which is my favourite Matheson. I think it's superb. So look at that, isn't that lovely? So yeah, these are bagged up because I did have them in my supposedly damp corner, which isn't damp. Then there's two from the 60s, and originally there were two sets in slipcases. I didn't go for those because they were more expensive. And this is American SF 1960 to 1966, and this is The High Crusade by Poul Anderson. Way Station, Clifford Simak, Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, which is probably the jewel in the crown in this one, and Call Me Conrad, aka This Immortal by Roger Zelazny, his debut. I've got an Eastern Press leather edition of that as well, so that's a good one. I tend to like Zelazny's early stories more than his novels, but I do like his early novels as well. They're really good, I think. So, and this was the fourth one in the series, and this, as you see, covers, let's see, 68 to 69. Hopefully they'll do a 70s one, which would be fantastic. And it's got Past Master R.A. Lafferty, which I've just reread, interestingly enough. Picnic on Paradise by Joanna Russ, which is a great sort of feminist adventure of Alex, her sword-wielding heroine. Nova by Samuel R. Delany, one of the great space operas. And Inferior by Jack Vance, you know, which is largely regarded as one of his finest singletons. So these are usually between 20 and 30 pounds. I got them at the lower end. If you watch online, they do go up and down in price, and that was that. I'll just show you this anthology's box of fun. I've got lots of others, but yeah, there's a little shot of some of my hardcover anthologies and a couple of paperbacks as well. So that's great. So I've got to have that series, and hopefully, as I say, we'll see a 70s one at some point, or 70s pair I should say, and maybe if they do that I'll go for a slipcase one, so we'll see. I'm just having a coffee, and there is something else which I got in the post today, which I bought on eBay the other day, and so we'll do a quick unboxing, as we say. And this, let's see, where's my scissor? This is something which I bought for about £8, I think it was, and I had a Nectar voucher. You know, if you've got a Nectar card, if you have one and you haven't linked it to eBay, do, because if you spend and sort of sell, you get Nectar points. It's really good. So this actually cost me only a few quid, which was great. So I just get it open. And what is it? Well, it's a book by, do you know, a bit tantalising you, really. So let's see, we'll see what condition it's in. Right, this is Time in Eclipse by David S. Garnett. in Robert Hale. Robert Hale, of course, did lots of minor things for libraries in the SF series. There are the occasional important book like The Ballad of Beta 2 and Empire Star by Delaney, which is probably the most collectible one. I've got a copy of that. I'll show it to you sometime. And this is still in the library jacket. It does a bit of a leaning spine, so have a look at that. So do something about that, get the rubber bands on it, and I'll probably take this cover off. But that's Time Eclipse David S. Garnett. I'm assuming he's still alive. This is one of his... He wrote several books for Hale, and they're fairly routine, and this I think was about the third one, and this is one that had the most acclaim. So I have read him, but not for a long time. He briefly edited New Worlds in the late 80s, early 90s, when it was a paperback anthology, and he sort of came back, and you know, he just sort of have his moments. So so yeah, and the thing with Hale is they do have a wonderful period feel. I love that font, I absolutely love it. So I shall let you know what it's like when I've read it, and sometime maybe we look at some Hale stuff. So that's today's diary entry of this collector.